Welcome to Knicks Buzz. I'm CT, your host, and joining me, the one, the only, Marc Berman of the New York Post, the hardest working man covering the Knicks. How are you, Mark?
I'm doing good, CT. Just landed in Minneapolis and looking forward to the game Tuesday night. And it's going to be interesting with the COVID situation, how competitive the Timberwolves will be, actually.
Absolutely, yeah, that's the story going around the league at the moment. And of course, there's a lot more news to came today that we'll touch on. But let's start with the Christmas Day wash up. It ended up in a fairy tale, you could say, for the New York Knicks, and Kemba Walker as well announced as Player of the Week, Eastern Conference today. I guess that just caps off what's been a crazy, a resurgence whirlwind as well. You wrote a great piece the other day on that as well, and I guess what are your thoughts on how this may impact this situation more? It's got a lot of national attention as well.
Yeah, it was the perfect capper to his week. Listen, he averaged, 27, 28 points, maybe 7 assists, even 6 rebounds. I mean, it was a no-brainer. And the Knicks were 2-2 after being in such a big slump. Uh, it was an amazing week for him. It started in Boston. Thibodeau desperate. 6 COVID guys were out, and Derrick Rose was on the verge of surgery. And he came in, and you go back to that Boston game, and we almost minimized how amazing to sit for nearly 2 weeks without even playing 1 minute, and to go into an NBA game and to score 29 points and make the moves he did, show the conditioning he had that night, and then he just kept getting better. And Christmas Day, as you said, a fairy tale. The Garden fans are so great. I mean, I know on TV, I think they were tracking the triple double, but you're in the arena, you don't have the stats in front of you. But the moment Kemba grabbed that 10th rebound, the fans just erupted in an ovation and then a big chant. And it was just such an amazing moment, uh, just to see where he came from. I mean, this comeback story may be just starting. And, Thibodeau now is trapped. I mean, that Thibodeau has some reservations about Kemba Walker's game, but now he's got to roll with it. But listen, after the game, Thibodeau said he's playing differently, way more aggressive. Kemba admitted didn't want to step on anyone's toes. He felt he was playing tentatively because of that. And now, after sitting all those games, he's just full bore, all out. This is Kemba looking like the all star, but you got a back to back coming up. You got Minnesota Tuesday night, Detroit Wednesday night. I think he's got to play both games, and we'll see how his knee holds up now that he's really like, he sat a while, and that might have helped his knee also.
Yeah, definitely. The minutes you mentioned it, that was something that I was watching closely, 35, 40 minutes. How long can he continue this? And if you had asked me at the start of the season, who would be the first player to get a triple double, I would have probably guessed Julius Randle this season. But it's fitting that Kemba Walker ends up being that first player on Christmas Day. So the seventh player now in NBA history to get the triple double on Christmas Eve. So it was absolutely a fairy tale. And you got to feel that the locker room, is got to be feeling a lot more happy for this situation now.
Yeah, I think everyone when they were analyzing the move, I think they were looking at it in a very narrow scope. What the benching of Kemba, not even the initial benching, but once they were shorthanded and Thibodeau still didn't use him, I think the locker room, I think some players had their eyebrows raised because he has such respect and he has such a resume and so accomplished. And they're like, wow, I could be easily discarded like that too. And Kemba had handled it so well, and he still couldn't buy a minute on the court. So I think now that he's back and doing well, I think everyone's happy for him because they saw Kemba on the bench during that, 9 games, and they saw him cheering hard for them. And that meant a lot to those young players. And the best line that Kemba has said all season was when we did talk to him finally for the first time after the demotion. And he said, I just want to be a role model for these young players because I know some of them look up to me. And he was a role model. And that's why they're so happy for him to see this success. And the morale of the team is much better. And Julius Randle is happy. And that's probably the most important thing because they finally showed some really good chemistry on Christmas. And Julius, I think on national TV, he didn't say it to us exactly this way, but he called Kemba the heart and soul of the team. And that, I mean, maybe he was just being a little bit of a phony, but for him to say that was very indicative of how well liked he is.
Definitely, yeah. He's definitely got more fans, and obviously he's always been a popular player around the league. You got players tweeting out, his recent success, and it's just great to see. And of course, this latest accolade, like I said earlier, it's only going to get more and more attention around the league. And I think that trade talk, for me personally, that trade talk for Kemba is probably quashed now with Derrick Rose out.
Yeah, well, Derek is going to probably come back after the deadline. Uh, Listen, if it's 8 weeks, it's like late February or to the latter part of February. So the trade deadline will have just ended. I just think that right now Thibodeau has to roll with Kemba as long as he can roll with him, as long as his knees hold up. And listen, the when Kemba was demoted, his his people were not happy, but they wanted to wait. They wanted to give it time. But if it had gone on any longer, trust me, uh, they would have demanded Kemba be traded. Listen, it was just in Boston, what is it, 9 days ago, where Kemba was asked point blank by Steve Popper, do you want to remain a Knick? And this was his first game back. He had no idea what the future was. And instead of just saying, of course I want to be a Knick, I'm from the Bronx, he said, I want to play. And he is playing and he will continue to play.
Yep. Yeah, it's now on Thibodeau to figure out, what's working, on Christmas Day and to help that continue. But the Knicks obviously hit the road, a brutal road trip right now. As you touched on, you're in Minnesota. It's freezing. Um, they play, Minnesota, then they play Detroit, then it's OKC, and then Toronto, which I believe you're avoiding that trip now, given what happened last time. But it's a pivotal stretch for these Knicks. 4 games that you could say are very winnable, but also COVID ravaged teams as well. Minnesota are without Karl Anthony Towns, Anthony Edwards, and possibly D'Angelo Russell and Patrick Beverley as well. So the Knicks really have potentially another gift.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's 8 guys on the COVID list for the Wolves, and the Wolves beat the Knicks here last season. Very tough last second loss. In fact, it was made even worse because Anthony Edwards took a little shot at RJ Barrett, if you remember, saying, yeah, our team was hoping he would take the final shot. It came down to a last possession. These are 4 winnable games, and Minnesota is absolutely decimated. The Knicks are getting their guys back. Miles McBride, Nerlens Noel, Jericho Sims still not with the team, but they definitely have enough. Quickly will probably make his return tomorrow. So, Kemba will start, and you got Grimes playing really well. Detroit is a disaster. I mean, I don't know how Troy Weaver continues on. I mean, I don't know what he's doing. They're a disaster. The Knicks, beat them at the Garden just last week. So that should be a winnable game. Oklahoma City, we know, is really struggling. Toronto is absolutely decimated, but that's not till after the new year, January 2nd. You're right. I will not be going to Canada. Too much testing involved, too much risk. If God forbid you test positive when you're trying to get back to the United States, then I'm stuck in Toronto for 10 days. So all the writers will not be going to Toronto, but we'll be making this chilly trip to Minnesota, Detroit, and OKC. Although I haven't seen the exact weather report for OKC, but I know it's usually cold there at this time of year. But the Knicks have a chance to go 4-0, and that would be a 5-game winning streak, getting them to 500 or one better. So this is really time to cash in, and especially if Kemba and Julius have this connection going, and Kemba's running the offense, and Thibodeau was so happy with his passing. They got off to that 19-3 start. Kemba setting the tone, moving the ball. I mean, this might be a really successful, if cold, road trip.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it is a really important part of the season for the Knicks, Mark, with obviously the trade period coming up early February. And of course, the New York Knicks will play Boston back to back after after this road trip as well. So these Knicks do get up against Boston, Evan Fournier and Kemba Walker playing against their old teams. But you mentioned, quickly coming back potentially. The New York Knicks are starting to get healthy, minus Derrick Rose, which is the opposite of a lot of other teams. This is going to create somewhat of a bit of a rotation jam and a headache for Tom Thibodeau, so to speak. Quentin Grimes, Deuce McBride are all deserving of minutes. And I think Derrick Rose being out probably makes that decision a bit easier.
Well, not when McBride comes back. Listen, McBride was spectacular in his last game before he got COVID, playing the entire second half. Again, it was in Houston. Kemba didn't get in the game despite Rose being out for that second half with his ankle. So right now they're okay. So, Kemba would start, and then you got a bench rotation with three guys with Quentin, Burks, and Quickly. But then McBride comes back, and I think Thibodeau had felt that McBride had earned a spot. But now, if he comes back, it's going to be very tough for him to play unless he expands the rotation. And then he also could play small and not use the center, just have Randle as the center and put Barrett at power forward, or like use a lot of the wings and guards that they have. Mitchell had a very nice game. Has had a couple of nice games. But in terms of, we've talked about this before, their center position, you get no outside shooting from them. They can't space the floor as well when they're on the court. But listen, when Kemba and Mitchell are connecting, that's terrific, and Mitchell is putting pressure on the rim. But, Thibodeau has options. But when McBride comes back, everyone was excited about seeing him in a rotational spot, but it's going to be hard. And Quentin has really earned his time. And listen, when I was writing about him before the draft, I wasn't just talking about his three-point shooting. I was saying that Thibodeau, in that workout in Tarrytown, he really liked how he played defense. I mean, they were impressed in Chicago at the Combine. So this is not a shock. They drafted him because they saw a two-way player. And I wrote before the season, if one of the rookies is going to get time, it's going to be Quentin.
Yeah, absolutely. He is deserving of minutes, and as is Miles. It's just a shame every player went down after they hit some form, Kevin Knox included.
Yeah.
But I've got to ask you about Obi Toppin, Mark. Seems like every single fan wants to see him play more. And you mentioned the centers struggling. Is there a particular reason why Tibbs is against, looking at that Obi and Randle look a bit more?
Yeah, Obi had a very efficient game on Christmas. I could do without the showboating at the end. I think it incites the other team when you do a slam dunk contest between the legs dunk in a blowout in the final seconds, and they will see Atlanta January 15th, and the Atlanta Hawks will be healthy, and I think they may remember Obi's showboat dunk. But other than that, he gives them so much energy in the half court, and with the, he's the best player they have in transition, and it gives them that element. The problem is, and these are the two biggest things to Thibodeau, he's a bad three-point shooter, and he's not a great team defender. And it doesn't offer any rim protection. And that's why he's not getting more minutes. And I'm a defender of Thibodeau in this issue. Maybe Thibodeau has hit the sweet spot with Obi Toppin. He's in the perfect spot. He's giving him the perfect amount of minutes to flourish, to be as efficient as he can be without hurting Randle's minutes. I think he may have just listen. He could maybe play a few more minutes here and there, but I wouldn't give him that many more minutes. The Randle Toppin front court is just not a good defensive tandem. So that's the main reason that they don't go more to that alignment. And I don't know, everyone is clamoring for more minutes. Sometimes you hit the sweet spot, and Thibodeau thinks he's hit the sweet spot. Listen, Thibodeau is one of the great basketball minds uh, in the NBA right now. And if he thought the team would be better off with Toppin playing more minutes, he'd do it. But the other thing is Toppin is a great teammate, so he can accept playing these type of minutes, and he's not going to squawk about it. But listen, as the season goes on, if they're still struggling, I think he'll have to maneuver a little bit.
Yeah, I definitely you hit the money there with him trying to balance that, Obi's strengths versus, what he gives the team. Also, it's worth noting Leon Rose, was very high on Toppin. That's his selection. And I'm more thinking down the line, when does it come that pivotal point where, you decide what to do with Obi in terms of his future and, what his future can be in New York with these minutes, and allowing him that opportunity to thrive a little bit more. But I think we are a year or two away from that. But as Randle was struggling, a lot of the fans were thinking, okay, why don't we have a look at what Obi can give us?
Yeah, well, I think a lot of that, you're right, had to do with Randall struggling. But now maybe he's coming out of his funk. He's had some very miserable post game press conference with us in recent weeks, but on Christmas he really seemed very very happy and accepting of Kemba Walker as a guy that he could play off of. It's the first time he's ever said we're feeding off each other, and the chemistry between the two was pitiful earlier in the season. And Randall, and I've probably said this on your show, Randall was the one player who sounded happy when Kemba got demoted. Everyone else was very reserved about it. But Randall was excited. We need more size. We can switch more. But I think it was more that him and Kemba weren't hitting it off. They both liked the ball a lot. So now they seem to be finding some equilibrium. And when you mention Obi and the future, you make a great point. Obi plays Julius's position. Uh, he can't be held down his whole career because Julius is the power forward. So you have to wonder. I'm writing for my newsletter about like 2022. You have to wonder, and the future. You have to wonder if Obi one day is going to be part of this blockbuster that Leon Rose is trying to make to get this team to the next level. So Obi's trade value has skyrocketed from a year ago. Listen, going into the playoffs last year, I wrote it, and I had a good source on it. That Thibodeau was wondering if he was going to have to limit Obi's minutes even more in the playoffs because of his defense. And he had a great playoff against Atlanta. Not great, but he was solid. He was one of the few players who actually played well against Atlanta, and he carried into summer league, and he's carried it into his second season.
Yeah, look, at the end of the day, it's all good problems to have for an organization with a young player peaking. It just means decisions are going to have to be made. And of course, RJ Barrett, a lot of people are not realizing that a decision might need to be made on him and his extension at the end of next season as well. So yeah, the organization does have a lot of decisions to make. But yeah, speaking of problems, just touching on the league, the COVID situation, Mark, since we last spoke, it's gotten, more and more, I guess, unpredictable every single day. It's a wait and see type of thing, and it's becoming a compromised, season essentially. Jason Tatum, the latest player to hit protocols. Some of the Hawks players straight after Christmas Day. John Collins, Karl Anthony Towns. You mentioned a depleted Minnesota as well. So there was some news today that potentially the quarantine period has been reduced now to 6 days only. So that should make the league's product a bit more, fuller.
Yeah, well, the 6 days instead of 10 days, but you still have to test negative one time to get back on the court. But, Adam Silver, I mean, last season he was all about safety, and during the bubble season, he was all about safety. And now he wants to play. He's desperate to get this season uh, without interruption. He needed Christmas Day for his broadcast allies.
Yep.
He doesn't want to pause the season. He wants it to finish in mid-April. He wants the finals back in late June or mid to late June. He wants normalcy. And yeah, the NHL has taken some steps to pause a little bit, for an extra few days. But I don't know what it's going to take for Adam. I mean, he's letting teams sign as many replacement players as they need. He just does not want to pause it. He doesn't want to cancel games. I'm flying during this in the room with the players who test positive the next day, and they're without their masks. It's the Wild West out there. And thankfully, it looks like this Omicron variant is not as dangerous as Delta or the original. So, I was at the doctor the other day, and he feels this is the COVID's last stand. They're making the COVID is making one final stand here, and then by February we'll be all right. So let's cross our fingers, because right now it's very scary. The Knicks did not practice today, not allowed to under NBA protocols. They had one-on-one drills with a coach. It's just very. And tomorrow morning, they haven't decided if they're going to be able to shoot around under NBA guidelines. They have to wait for the tests to come in. We haven't had media access since Christmas Day with the team, so it's just a crazy, crazy time.
It is, yeah. It's very unpredictable, especially for the fans. To not know who's going to play on a nightly basis, and it certainly gives you guys more work to report, each and every game. The lineups and that. Just wanted to touch on, was there any latest story or story that you've got coming up that you wanted to touch on?
No, I mean, I'm working on my newsletter, so that's going to drop in the email boxes Thursday morning. But I'm just looking forward to talking to some players tomorrow and the coach, because it's been since Christmas. And just, we wanted to talk to Quentin Grimes after the Christmas Day game, but they never brought him into the room. So, I mean, it's a very tough season to cover. Even it's getting tougher now than it was last season when Zoom was prevailing, but at least we got the players on Zoom. Now, nothing is going on media-wise, but tomorrow things will pick up, and Thibodeau back in Minnesota to face his former team. There'll be a lot more fans than last season. There was very limited audience, and we'll see how much he gets booed or cheered. I mean, Minnesota under this new coach Finch, I mean, they've turned it around. They're close to 500. I actually, in my predictions in preseason, thought the question was, which team you think will surprise? And I picked Minnesota. I thought there's a lot of young talent there, and maybe they will get it together. And I love Anthony Edwards, but no Edwards tomorrow, no Towns, probably no Russell. I mean, the Knicks should really have a little bit of a cakewalk, but we'll see. It's a very, very listen. It's unprecedented. Even last season, we didn't see these type of positives.
No, absolutely, yeah. And you talk about post-Christmas gift. That's definitely what they've received in this, matchup against Minnesota. And just quickly, we touched on this briefly last time, but with all these the options now to sign replacement players and the COVID situation, do you think there's going to be less movement with the trade period? I personally felt that December 15, we would have seen some movements. But I think this has just put a stop to that.
Yeah, I agree. I think the GMs are in scramble mode just to like field the team. It's tough to talk about a big trade, especially packaging a few players, uh, and plus making trades where the new players are going to have to be in quarantine for 6 days. I do think at this moment it's put a damper on trade talks. I know there has been today a report that Cleveland and Philadelphia have talked more seriously about a Ben Simmons trade, but Simmons has been on the trade block forever. So that's probably been a conversation that's been going on for a few months. Uh, I think Simmons, I know the Knicks have been linked a little bit. I just feel that it's too big of a risk right now to take that contract. It's too big a contract. It's too long term of a contract when you have a guy with mental issues, claiming that he has mental health issues. But I think it's more he's got a mental block right now regarding basketball in terms of shooting a jump shot. And do you really want to take a risk on a guy who doesn't feel he could even hit a jump shot? Not in this day and age. I mean, he's a very good defender and he moves the ball and he's great athleticism, but I would be very wary. Listen, if he was bought out, I'd jump at him in a second, obviously, but that contract is a monster contract.
Yep, it is, absolutely. And I think that is the big domino to fall. More trades probably won't happen until the Ben Simmons deal happens, because there'll be a lot of moving parts, and I can see it being a three-way trade as well. I really
so much
appreciate.
money going around. They're probably going to need three teams, and maybe the Knicks could get in as a third team, not getting Simmons, but maybe some of the moving pieces.
Yep, definitely. Yeah. And before I let you get out of here, Mark, I really appreciate your time as always. And like I said earlier, the hardest working man covering the Knicks. But I want to throw some quick fire 5 questions at you. 5 quick questions, 5 quick answers, responses. You ready?
I guess so. Yeah, shoot.
Yeah. Okay. What is your favorite city or arena to travel to when you're on the road?
Well, definitely it's not my favorite arena, but New Orleans is like my favorite city in the country. I mean, just the food and the jazz and all the atmosphere and Bourbon Street and Frenchman Street. Great, great town. Unfortunately, the arena is not a great atmosphere at all. It's a football town, and that's why Zion Williamson is probably not going to last as a Pelican for many more years. But yeah, New Orleans to visit. I mean, I think all the beat writers would put New Orleans up there, if not San Francisco.
Yeah, it takes me back to when that boy ran onto the court to hug Carmelo Anthony. I remember the arena seemed quite relaxed there.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that was New Orleans. Yeah, that was. In fact, Carmelo won the NCAA championship in New Orleans, although I believe that was the Superdome. But yeah, he won his championship in the Big Easy.
Okay. Yep. Okay. Next question: Who's the nicest beat writer outside of yourself? Obviously.
That's a real tough one because there's a rough crew this year. The nicest current beat writer?
Yeah, or can be past.
Yeah.
Past.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, I'll just go current because the fans are familiar with these guys. We have a really new great guy on the beat from the Athletic. Fred Katz came over from the Wizards. I don't know if he's been on the show. Really great guy, and he actually started his career in Oklahoma City for a small newspaper out there covering the Thunder. So he's looking forward. He's the only writer looking forward to the Knicks' visit to Oklahoma City later this week on New Year's Eve for him to go back to where he started. But yeah, Fred Katz, really great guy, and giving him a nice plug.
Yeah, nice one. Yeah, I haven't had Fred on the show, but I would love to. But
Yeah,
he is a good follow on Twitter.
yeah, he
Seems like a
tweets
really,
too much though.
really
I'm not.
funny guy.
He
Yeah,
tweets a little too much, and he knows I'm not saying anything that I haven't told him to his
yeah,
face. But other than his tweet activities, yeah, he's a really nice guy.
yeah. And who was the best Knicks player to interview, past or present?
Yeah, I believe that's such an easy question because it's hands down Carmelo Anthony.
Carmelo.
Yeah, beating out Latrell Sprewell. Because if you had asked me that question before 2010, I would have said Sprewell. But Carmelo, and I've said this on many shows, he's such a delight with the media. He's so candid, and there's not a question he won't answer. Like I've never seen one moment where you would ask him a question and he'll brush it off or say that's a dumb question or get irritated. He's just a really nice guy. That's why he's so popular in the league. You know, he's been a great player, but he's just a nice guy. I think listen, I have ripped him in the paper when he was with the Knicks because I just didn't feel he was clutch enough in the final minutes of the game. I just don't think he came through enough for the Knicks. But in terms of dealing with the media, he was sensational. Ennis Cantor is second place, and he won a Media Good Guy award. And Derrick Rose would finish in third. You know, Derrick was one of those players where you thought he would be difficult, and he was exactly the opposite. I mean, even before a game, he would be by his locker where everyone else would be somewhere hiding, and you could go up to him and talk to him. So, but Melo's one, Cantor two, and Rose three.
Yep, you definitely hit the nail there because that definitely came across on screen as well. And especially Carmelo, I think the appreciation for him has grown since he left. Obviously, there's been some losing, but just the way he handled the spotlight, like you said, there was no question too big or too small.
Yeah.
He answered it truthfully, honestly. He could brush things off. He just had that moxie about him, I think.
Yeah, he's got a lot of charisma, and it'll be interesting. You know, he loves this game. He's still playing, and maybe listen. I think next year might be his last year, and who knows if it's with the Knicks. He gave some hints when we spoke to him before the Knicks played the Lakers. But it's very interesting. Like, what will Carmelo do in retirement? Because he's going to do something big, whether he goes into broadcasting or I don't see coaching. I don't see it. Maybe GM. Who knows? But it's something to start asking him probably next season. My prediction is next season will be his last, and I could be wrong. He could be someone who wants to play till he's 40.
Yeah, I know he dabbles in some ownership. He
Yeah,
owns a soccer team, and I think in Puerto Rico, and I could definitely see him being an owner of a franchise.
right, or like a president, or yeah, he's definitely going to be active in retirement, and naturally, you know, his son, he'll be keeping a close eye on his son, who's now playing in high school basketball in New York City.
And a career highlight for you, Mark, a career highlight.
Oh, okay, yeah, you went in and out on the internet. Career highlight. It's very recent, and maybe I'm saying it's because it's so recent. But game one of the playoffs against Atlanta, when the Garden was finally almost full, and we hadn't seen fans all year or a year and a half. You know, we had 1,900 for half the season, but the electricity that night and the fans were just so joyous and so loud from a half hour before tip off, chanting, "Let's go Knicks," and then chanting against Trae Young. And it was a sensational game down to the final seconds. Trae Young winning it, of course, beating Frank Ntilikina to the basket. But it was such a great night. It felt like, you know, it's kind of melancholy now because it felt that night that the pandemic was over. And it turned out it's not. But it was such a emotional night for me to be around, you know, 16,000 screaming fans, and they weren't even in masks at that point. All season, we were up in the bridge. It was a terrible atmosphere. They finally put us down below for that game. It was just a great, great night. I'll always remember it.
Yeah, no, I don't think that's a prisoner of the moment. I think as a fan, that's something I'll never, ever forget. Going full circle from the start of the season to then finishing on that magical note. Absolutely. And the last question I'll hit you with, Mark, is who's the best should have been a Knick player?
Well, his career's not over, but I've probably written a lot of stories about LeBron James, who many years ago kept talking about the Garden as his favorite arena to play in. And I thought in 2010 he was coming, and it didn't happen. And there's a lot of theories, even recently, that he really wanted to be here, but his family was against it, or uh, and I was told that at the time too, that he didn't want to subject his family. Actually, he didn't want to subject his family to the crazy media attention that would have been had he been in it. But he's the guy, and who knows? Maybe his final season, something happens, and he finishes career in a Knicks uniform. It seems like Knicks fans. Anytime I bring him up in that light, Knicks fans are like, we don't want him. But who knows what will happen? Maybe Carmelo and LeBron somehow finish their careers in a few years in the Knickerbocker uniform. But that's the guy.
Yeah, absolutely. And well, I heard, Kobe Bryant was thinking or was close to entertaining the Knicks, right? When Phil was here, or
Uh, if it was Phil, I never reported it, but Isaiah Thomas met with him when he was a free agent back during the Isaiah era, and Isaiah made it seem that Kobe had a lot of interest, and I always sensed whenever I asked Kobe about New York, there was something there. He grew up a lot of his time in Philadelphia, and New York City was, a magical place. When you're in Philly, a lot of people envy New York City. It's so close, and it's, the Mecca. So, yeah, that's another good choice. But I think LeBron was really close in 2010. To being a Knick, and of course Kevin Durant uh, as well. And
Steph.
there's still rumors that if all Kyrie had to say to Kevin was, "Let's do the Knicks," and they would have been together with the Knicks. But Kevin didn't want to leave Kyrie, and Kyrie wanted the Nets only. He would not think about being with the Knicks, and we still don't know exactly why. I think he didn't want all the pressure what had come. He wants to be in New York City, but he didn't want the pressure of being a Knick.
Yeah, definitely. It's a place where not everyone can play in, like we've seen, and I think a player that's probably going to take the Knicks to their next championship, I feel, is a player that's drafted here,
Yeah.
grew up in New York, or learns the ropes here coming up, and that could be RJ Barrett, putting good energy out there.
Yeah, well, he has New York City roots, and he loves New York. He really does. And he really wanted to be drafted number 3 by the Knicks. He did not want to go to Memphis at number 2. Never worked out for them. And Memphis had no choice but to take Morant, and they made the right choice. But still, RJ was very thankful that he didn't wind up on Beale Street.
Yeah. Well, no, you definitely killed the quick fire 5, Mark. I really appreciate that. And your time
It wasn't
as
so
well.
quick, though.
Yeah, it's hard, right?
I think it's supposed to be real quick.
They're great questions, but your answers were quick. You knew straight away as soon as I asked. It's like you just knew, and that's coming from someone who's been, covering this league and this team for 22 years, I think, and counting. So hopefully another 22 more.
I don't know about that one. It might be a little much.
Yeah.
But
it seems you are enjoying it, as much as you ever have.
Yeah, it really still is fun, and I wish we were back in the locker room. I don't know when that's going to happen. Rumors are that it will never happen. I don't know what it's like in Australia in terms of the press in the locker room, but I know in England with the soccer and in European basketball, the writers aren't in the locker room, and it's an American thing. And the NBA, who knows what they may do? We're a little worried that the days of being in the locker room and being able to go up to any player you want before the game, after the game, could be over, and that's a little troubling when I think about that.
Yeah, fingers crossed that doesn't come to that, because all the memories I have growing up, and the really fond memories of the great interviews from yourself, from Tina Savasio, Rebecca, from all the other great beat writers. It's synonymous with seeing Carmelo Anthony at his locker, or Patrick Ewing at his locker with his knees iced, and
Yeah.
things like that.
No, it's true. And now we're at a point where I tweeted earlier that MSG Network, their broadcasting crew and their engineering crew, they're not making this 4-game trip. They're going to do it like last season, remotely. And I think it's just for this trip. I think they'll be back on the road, hopefully for, Boston or whatever the next road game is. But this 4-game trip will be 100% remote for the MSG Network.
Yeah, definitely something very unique, and hopefully it's a good one for everyone. And stay well, stay safe out there, Mark. Really appreciate your time, and we'll catch you hopefully at the end of the road trip.
Thanks so much, CT, and enjoy the 75 degrees in Australia.
Yeah, I will. Thanks, and stay warm. Stay warm in Mini.
I'll try to.
Yeah, go get that coat.